Okay, well, thank you all for having us. We all do a lot of different things, so and we're limited on time, so I'm going to go ahead and get right into it. And we're going to talk about the Mass Tim training that we did in 2019 for CRSW. So next slide. Dr. Harden came up and at a Tim Coalition meeting in 2019, he, asked the group what about having a mass Tim training? We're talking about remote sites. So we had to have, a whole plan. We needed a goal of how many students we, wanted to train that day. Then you got to figure out instructors. And you have to have the facility. These are important steps in planning that mass training. And we wanted to be all inclusive. So we had an outside portion. So we needed a facility with outdoor space. And then the outreach, how are we going to get this out to everybody? And then the remote classes had to be set up. And then afterwards we did a survey was given out and we did after action review. Next slide. So part of the planning and the goal that we set was we wanted to make sure that, how are we going to be the most impactful? How are we going to, reach it, do it, just get it all out there. So first of all, we made a list of everything that we have to have. And then we had to assign the duties. We had to pick up the instructors for the class, who was going to do it, had not had the time, to do it, because this is an all-day deal. So we then separated the modules. So, you didn't have one responder teaching, the multitude of slides. So we had, of course, DPS, DOT, you had towing, and we had fire. And then we had some floaters running around, just in case one of us, something came up or we had other meetings or something going on. So, and then there was who's going to do the paperwork for all of it, registration, all of those things, you have to plan for. And then also, I'm always thinking, what can go wrong? And for the goal, we set a goal of 300 students to be trained that day. That was what we wanted. Of course, I wanted 500, but that's just me. But we got 300. So next slide. Part of the thing is, as you all know, we want, the media, we want to spread the message. We want people to understand, and that's for the motoring public. So any way we can get that message out there and create more awareness for everyone is really important. So, and then, when setting that goal, you have to be realistic in your thinking, like me, I wanted 500, we settled for 300. So, about what can be doable. Next slide. Again, the instructors, we had 4, we had 1 from each discipline. This is actually a picture from the class that day in the main site that we had it at. And then, like I said, we divided the modules. Next slide. And then this is a picture of the outdoor activities. And I think we had 3 different scenarios and 1 for each of, the main things where we could incorporate EMS, where we could incorporate towing, and then, how you're going to work the scene. So we went through every single one of them, and we did run a little over on time. But, we had to pick a neutral area. So of course we picked Phoenix because that's kind of in the middle of the state. We had people from all over the state there. But, we had to be aware of how many people could your facility hold. How many could the remote sites hold? So, there's a lot of different pieces. And fortunately, we did have Dr. Harden. And, he is a full force when coming to wanting to do something and being completely OCD about it. So just going to say that in a good way. So we had to have an outside area. Of course, we went to the Mesa Fire Training Facility, who's always been really great to us. And it's a great, great partner. in everything that we do. And so they have, you know, the track, they have everything we needed. And because we have worked with them and done these type of events before, you know, it was secondhand. So for me, as far as the towing aspect in anything that we do, you know, I do all of the logistics for the towing equipment, whether we need cars, they, you know, and then everybody else kind of takes up nationwide, you know, the rest of it. So, and then remote locations. Dr. Harden can speak to that a little bit, because he's going to take over here in a minute, but, the remote locations were key to this because, you know, that's how everyone else can participate, on that day. And of course, makes our numbers go up as well. So we had to make sure their registrations were in, you know, everything was working for them. Did they have a live instructor or were they doing it virtually from us? So a lot of factors to consider, but you can do it. We have a great template for it, you know, now that we've done it. So that's on my part, I think. Next slide. That's Dr. Harden.
Hi. Leave it to Angela to make the possible out of the impossible. She's always keeps us all in line and keeps us encouraged. So she's a dear friend and a colleague, and I appreciate her immensely. So thank you, Angela. Okay. This information, the table came out of a report that I prepared, an after action report for my bureau to give an idea of what our workload was for that. As you can see, we have in Arizona, we have 4 EMS regions broken down by counties. You see central region includes Gila, Maricopa, and Pinal, and then et cetera for southern, southeastern, western, and northern regions. And of that, this was the promotion that went out from the Bureau. We sent it out to all of our EMS training facilities, our EMS and fire service providers, our base hospitals, and our local law enforcement that we had. Total amount of successful emails and promotion was 564 connections and only had 3 bounces, which is pretty good. And Angela, thankfully, she had her information available, which I didn't have, so I appreciate that. She mentions that the towing outreach executed a comprehensive social media campaign, and she's really good at that. She emailed notifications of over 300 towing companies across Arizona. And then TIM training is required to be part of the Department of Public Safety's rotation program. So that's something that is mandatory for towing, getting licenses in Arizona. Next slide, please. Part of the great thing about Arizona, it's a large state, in 15 counties, but it feels like a small state. It's very well communicated. And we have several news agencies that actually came out to the main site in Mesa, and they presented. One was at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 2 were at 6 a.m., then one at 7 a.m., then one at 4 p.m. And they actually went out and interviewed various folks at the Mesa site, such as they interviewed our DPS, our public safety officer on the TIM, our Maricopa County and our DOT providers, et cetera, to talk about why TIM is so important and why we're having this TIM training event. As you can see on this table, each one had a total of their audiences that was reached, and whatever statistical process media services used to identify their audience, that's what it was. And they associated a dollar value for each one of those. So in a nutshell, all 5 outreaches resulted in approximately 177,825 individuals throughout the state that had a chance to review the video. And the total value was just over $9.4 thousand in costs that would have taken cost us to do that if we did it on our own budget. So it's nice to have the appreciation and the voluntary support of the media in Arizona. Next slide, please. Now, this is the Mesa facility. At the Mesa Public Safety Training Facility was the main site. Now I can tell you all the main site and the other 8 remote locations or satellite sites were all done on in-person training. These weren't remote. These weren't virtual classes. Luz, who serves as our administrator or administrative assistant or manager for our TIM coalition, set up the Eventzilla registration process and set up the registration process and captured the data. And then we also had a post-event survey at all 9 facilities. Next slide. Down below, we had total 300 trained was our goal. And we had 477 that were registered, and we ended up with 321 trained. So we exceeded our training by about, anyway, that's a good number. But anyway, the attrition rate was 33%, which really isn't too bad if you consider that this was a multi-site location. So that's not bad. Next slide, please. Now for 2024, I should also mention that we had in 23, we had a TIM summit in September. Anticipation for gathering momentum for the CRSW. We had 36 attendees at that event with multiple disciplines involved, and it kind of gave us a good idea on how we can get people involved for the 2023 CRSW. But for 24, what we're planning this year is, again, we're going to do our governor's proclamation. It'll be our third in the year, our third annual proclamation. We'll be having a live virtual TIM training that's open statewide for statewide registration. That's been very productive over the several years we've been doing it, since 19. We'll have CRSW messaging on the various TIM websites, social media campaign across all platforms amongst all of the TIM coalition participants, the state and local agencies and nonprofit providers. We'll have DMS boards with CRS messaging throughout the Phoenix metro area, which makes it nice for motorists to see that as they're driving along. And that'll include support. We'll have collaboration with our, this is something we're planning this year, more of a direct active participation. We have 85 ALS base hospital locations. Those are the locations where the paramedics receive their online medical directions from the physicians and nurses. And they also have their EMS coordinators, which falls in line with their training side of the shop. So this year, we're going to try and do some support in-person training at various strategic locations amongst the base hospitals. We're also going to try and do or support an online participation with the TIM training, which is CAPCI approved, so paramedics can get their CEs for that. The goal is to try and see if we can make a competition to see which base hospital can get the most EMTs and paramedics trained that week. We're also going to be having, once we get the CRSW poster, we're going to try and make posters available at all of the base hospital location ED waiting rooms. So patients waiting to be seen can at least see it and be aware of it. Last year, we had a nationwide pizza company. They distributed CRSW messages throughout the western part of Maricopa County. That was very successful. We're going to try and repeat that this year, but we're going to try and extend it throughout Maricopa County. And then maybe in future years, maybe do it statewide. So we'll see how that goes. And another aspect that we're exploring is to contact a large national big box retail store that has automotive services as part of their customer service, to see if they would be willing to put on their receipts. So when a customer comes in, either get a tire change, an oil change, or whatever it is, that when they get this printed on the receipt, the CRSW message, but they would receive on their work order what was done, what was wrong, their diagnostic report. It would be maybe the top right corner would be a printout of the CRSW message. Generally, the way these things work is you have a singular national number that you would call to arrange it. You can't go to each individual store to get them to do it. This goes to a national headquarters. So ideally, I'd like to do it nationwide. but if possible, maybe Arizona would be a good starting point. But if there's a way to do this nationwide amongst all 50 states and the various territories where they have these stores, that would be great. Now, if that were the case, I'd like to get Federal Highways participation in this as well for support. Next slide, but I think that might be it. Yep. Thank you so much.